Today's topic is engaging students with cats, and I hope there are some dog lovers in here as well. We're going to talk about what cats are and how they can be helpful to your teaching and our students' learning. So give me a yes in the comments if you sometimes wish you were a comedian, a stand-up comedian, so you could keep your students' attention in the classroom. So I actually asked, I know, only if I was as funny as Jim Gaffigan. He's one of my favorites. If you haven't seen his Hot Pockets routine, make sure you Google Jim Gaffigan and Hot Pockets. You can thank me later. But anyway, I actually received this comment from a faculty member who said, could you please train us on being stand-up comedians, because I feel like I need to do that in my classroom to keep my students engaged. So today we are talking about changing your classroom view from this and maybe even this to this. So in the chat, give me an oh yeah if you would love to see your students actively engaged during class like these students seem to be. And today we're talking about cats as a way to actively involve your students in the teaching and learning equation. So teaching is just one side of the educational equation. And in education, we work from this formula ultimately with the outcome that students leave us, and they leave our class, they leave our program, they leave our university with a solid education that will help them be successful in their future career. And you, as faculty, strive to effectively teach our students. And within this formula, you play a critical role as the teacher. That's why you were hired. You have an expertise in a particular area, and we hope that you can somehow instill that expertise within your teaching, and it will then transfer to our students. So we have a them within this equation as well, and we know that those are our learners, and our students play a critical role within the formula of education as well, and they need to do their part. But there's this thing that sometimes is overlooked, especially in on-campus classes where a lot of lecturing is happening. And this is that concept of interactive engagement. Interactive engagement was part of a piece of my dissertation during my PhD program. I looked at interactive learning objects specifically, and I did a lot of reading on this concept of interactive engagement and how it ultimately leads to learning. So according to one source, interactive engagement, sometimes called IE, it's achieved by questioning students, by challenging them. We need to challenge them to think or do something that requires thought. So students interact within our classrooms with each other. They interact with us as the teacher, as a coach, as a guide, and they also interact with guided materials, and those might be created by us or created by a publisher. So we have three types of interaction within our classrooms that we can focus on, and that's student to student, student to teacher, and student to content. And notice that I said student first, student to student, student to teacher, and student to content. Sometimes we focus on our part of that equation of us, it'd be teacher to student, right? We need to focus on putting the student in the main seat within what we do within the classroom. So one key ingredient of effective learning is frequent and thoughtful interaction. And our goal is to build that in throughout the learning experience within our classrooms. And we know that this might be one way that interactive engagement looks in our classroom, but the trouble is how do we do this? What are some techniques that we can use? So today I'm going to share with you some information about CATs, or classroom assessment techniques. But first, we need to have a little bit of a conversation about grading versus assessment. So when I talk to faculty about implementing more assessment within their classrooms, they suddenly say, well, I don't have time to grade all that stuff. And that's not what we're talking about here today. So there is a concept of grading and a concept of assessment. Grading is attaching an official grade to an assignment. It's official, it's formal. Sometimes we give students a rubric or a checklist. And this is usually for work done on their own or in a group, sort of outside of the formal learning situation, outside of our classroom. They're bringing work back in to show us what they had learned in order to be able to complete the assignment. And we grade it, we score it, and we tell them how well they did on that assignment. And that's grading. What we're talking about today is assessment. Assessment is different. We should keep assessment in our mind throughout the learning process. It's really our guide as faculty to help us determine if our students are learning, if they're tracking, if they're following with us, if they're keeping up, and if they're going in the right direction. It can help students know also whether or not they're learning. So these classroom assessment techniques are really shining the light on whether or not learning is happening. And both we, the faculty, and the students it'll be very clear whether or not that's happening. So then within this concept of assessment, we can talk about formative assessment and summative assessment. And it's just like the words intend. Formative is assessment done during teaching and learning. It's those things that we do along the path of learning. These little milestones, little questions, little activities that we can build in that will naturally flow within our lecturing, within our teaching, that can help students know whether or not they're tracking right along with us. And then summative assessment, that doesn't have to be graded either. Sometimes summative assessment is assessment done once the teaching and learning is done, and we just want to assess whether or not students have learned. So we can grade assignments and assess them, and we can also assess other things that don't necessarily need to be tied to a grade. So today we're focusing on formative assessment, things you can do during class, during your teaching and learning to build in interactive engagement. So let's take a look at what CATs are. So these CATs are oftentimes very simple. And you'll see I'll share a kind of a quick and dirty list with you of things that you can do, and many of them are very simple things to implement. They can be planned and they might be on the fly. So the more aware you are of CATs, and there's hundreds of ways that you can implement classroom assessment techniques, the more you know about them, the more you'll be able to implement them on the fly. Today, I'm going to show you some very specific ones that you can kind of plan into your PowerPoint slides to build in some interaction. They are often non-graded. They are anonymous-ish, and I'll explain that a little bit more as we go, but sometimes students will be answering things in a group, or it will be visible only to you, and so they are more anonymous. And it happens in the classroom. It's for both you and the students you will both be able to see whether or not learning is happening. They're useful for teaching and learning, and they are formative in nature. So today I'm going to show kind of this range of classroom assessment techniques. And if you think about buckets, you can place these into buckets from low tech, low prep, low supplies or no supplies, on the fly, and all the way up to high tech, a little bit of preparation involved before class, and maybe you need some supplies as you go in. If you have watched the presentation, the webinar I presented called Flipping Your PowerPoint for the Student Brain, we looked at this concept of the student brain being able to only handle small bits of new information at a time, and then they need to stop and process and move that information from their working memory into their short-term memory. And if we start class and we start talking, and 45 minutes later, we send them off out into the world, and we've not put in those stops. We've not chunked the information and allowed time for the student brain to process from working to short-term memory. It's probably in one ear and out the other. So think about your content that you need to cover today in your classroom and ask, how can you chunk it into buckets that make sense? And these classroom assessment techniques really are things that you can add right into your slides as stopping points for students to stop, reflect, talk about what they're learning before you move on to the next. So also from last month's Flipping Your PowerPoint for the Student Brain webinar, you might remember this slide. And you know, we're going to be putting slides right into our slide deck that promote us stopping the talking and asking active questions, doing something, asking students to do, think, so that their light bulb is going on and we're more in the driver's seat of the teaching and they are actually in the driving seat of learning rather than just idly listening to us. So buckle up and get ready to go. This is a Fast and Furious Cats example. Here's our first one. We're going to start with KWL, and that's what do you know, what do you want to know, and what did you learn? So from last month, again, I'll refer back to this often, Flipping Your PowerPoint for the Student Brain. You learned that the student brain needs to connect new information to existing information. So when we introduce new concepts to students, their brain is automatically trying to connect that new information to things they already know. So at the start of a unit, you might, as a class, walk through a KWL chart. So you might make a chart on the board, or you have students take out paper and they divide it into 3 sections. And one column is K, one column is W, and one column is L. So you'll have them fill out, what do you already know? What do you know about this topic, topic X? And this activates their prior knowledge and helps them get ready to connect the new information to what they already know. You might have them fill out the K and then get together with a partner and talk about what they each know. And now the other student may bring to memory some things that the other student did know, or they might hear something new from the other student that it will start to resonate once then you start to talk about those things in your formal teaching. The W is for what do they want to know? And this is priming the pump. It incites curiosity, it incites critical thinking, it gets them ready. It makes them start to think about what things you might introduce to them through this unit. And then they can put this piece of paper away, or you can have this chart and you can bring it out later and you'll fill in the L column, and that's what did you learn? And that could be mid-unit. It could be every day they're adding to this L column. It could be at the end they're adding to the L column and using that as a study guide. But this will help students see how far they've come. Another example is the minute paper. Some people call this an exit ticket. And this really tests how students are gaining knowledge or maybe they're not. So you might end the class by asking your students to write a brief response to a simple question. What's the most important thing you learned during this class today? Or what important questions remain unanswered? Any question will do. You might even have them write down 3 questions that they want to go home and learn more about. So the minute paper is just, as it says, is you take a minute. You could do this at the beginning of class as an entrance ticket to get them ready for learning based on what they read at home before they come to class. Or you could do it as an exit ticket, either what they want to go learn more about before the next class or what they felt was most important. Similarly, there's the muddiest points. So this is one of the simplest CATs to help assess where students are having difficulties. So if you're covering some difficult material, this just asks them to jot down a real quick response to one question, and that is, what was the muddiest point in the lecture today? So again, it could be an exit ticket. It might be, what was the muddiest point from your homework or from your reading? So it could be an entrance ticket. When they come into class, they sit down, they get out a sheet of paper and they write down their muddiest point. Something that was unclear or confusing. Again, it could be done at the start of class or at the end of class. And if you do it at the start of class, you could have students partner up and share, this was my muddiest point. What was yours? Oh, I understood that really well. Let me explain it to you from my point of view, or how this is how I try to remember that, or this is how it made sense to me. And now you're involving student to student interaction. If you collect these muddiest points, you could go back to your office and review them. If you see some common denominators there, a theme emerging of things that students really found confusing or unclear, you could do a little reteaching in the next class meeting. The next cat is I call red light, green light, and it's really index cards. So this requires a little bit of prep on your part, but when students come in, or maybe at the very first day of the class, you give students a red index card and a green index card. Or you could give them white index cards and have them write yes on one and no on the other. And throughout the class discussion, maybe it's a lecture on a tough topic, you can check in with your students. And this is one of those anonymous-ish because they're in class and they have these two cards, yes and no, and they're simply going to, you're going to ask a question and they're going to raise yes or no, or the red or the green. And obviously red is comparable to no and green is comparable to yes. So you could just ask students, who gets this? Or do you understand what I'm saying? How many of you think you could describe this to a friend, and have them raise those cards? So you'll be able to see very clearly, especially if they're red and green. If you see a sea of red being held up, that's a time where you need to step back, maybe talk about it from a different perspective. If you see a sea of red, but maybe a couple greens, call on those students and have them explain it from their own words, what you were just talking about. Sometimes a student has a way of using words that students will understand as well, and it might then start to click for the other students. So you might even say, if it's kind of a split, like a lot of red and a lot of, half red, half green, or half yes, half no, say, I want you to stand up and find someone with the opposite card. So if I'm a no and you're a yes, we might get together and now we're going to have a conversation about that particular question that you just asked us. The next one is think, pair, share. And I will say this is my most used cat. And it's probably my favorite because it involves reflection. A student is going to think. So they're going to do that individually on their own. So it's student to content interaction. And then they're going to pair, and that's student to student interaction in just a group of two. And then you can even pair two groups of two together and make a group of 4 if you want. And then you can do a share, which is an all group share. So think, pair, and share. So ask a question of the class. And the first part's really important. Have the student write down, not just think, but actually write down, do some reflecting, pen to paper, write down how they would answer that question. Then you would ask students to pair up with a classmate and discuss their answers. So here's that peer-to-peer teaching, peer-to-peer learning. And then after the pairs have had a chance to discuss their answers, have them share with a larger group of 4 or engage with the rest of the class. And you can engage and should engage during this activity by circulating around the class. So you're going to be eavesdropping into these partner and small group conversations that are taking place, and you'll be able to easily determine whether or not students were actually getting it. So think, pair, share, it puts the student at the center of their learning. And the research is heavy on this, that it shows that self-regulation of learning leads to student performance improvement. So when you've asked them to jot down and then describe to someone else, that puts them, the student, at the center of their own learning. And this can help engage them, help them interact with the material, and can improve their performance. The next one is a concept map. So after a class discussion or lecture, or even before your lecture, so they should have done some reading probably before they came to class. And these are great activities really to promote that reading before they come to class, because if they come to class knowing, Professor Lewis is going to ask us to get out a sheet of paper and do something, or Professor Lewis is going to ask us specific questions about this material, I need to be ready, I better do my reading. Concept map is a great one to encourage reading. So have students get together, put them in pairs or small groups, and create a concept map or a mind map of everything they know or remember about a topic. Now, this may be a slow ramp for students, so you may have to model for them the first time you ask them to do this. So together as a class, you might model creating a concept map based on what was discussed yesterday, or based on what the reading was that they did last night before they came to class. So they may not automatically know what you mean when you say create a concept map. So be sure to model that for them. So put them in, they can do this as a single student. So individually, you could put them in partners, a group of 4, or even a whole class. Maybe you assign a class, a student to lead the class through creating a concept map. That's an interesting thing to witness. I've done that a few times, and it's usually a very engaging conversation. So the mood of a classroom changes when you hand out poster paper and markers. It might even just be 9x11 printer paper and markers, or colored pencils. But even in a college classroom, when you hand these materials out to students, it's stating you need to do something now. I've given you materials and now it's time for you to create. So concept map is great for discussions. You can use it for reteaching. You can use it for reinforcement of content and ideas. And students are really self-evaluating. As they hold up their concept map or talk about their concept map, they're going to automatically compare theirs to other students, and they'll know really quickly whether or not they've learned as much as they need to, as much as other students. So you can really get a feel for students based on how detailed their maps are. The next one is popcorn Q&A. So to encourage that reading before students come to class, this is a great way to quiz your students informally, ungraded, without taking a lot of your class time. So when students come to class, start with a quick list of 10 to 12 questions that should be easily answered if they did the reading. So do this a few times. You might hear crickets the first couple times, but when you put positive pressure on students to read before class by asking these questions, calling on students by name, puts a little good pressure on them. So you might say the question and then call a name and wait for an answer. If no answer, just simply call the next name, and so on. Or you might start in the beginning by not calling on students by name, but they'll quickly learn. She will eventually probably start calling my name. I'm a little nervous. I'm going to do my reading so that I'm ready, right? So move quickly from student to student, don't highlight someone who doesn't know the answer. Don't say no, just move on to the next student. Move quickly. You can even have a roster, and you're going to pick a different starting point each day when you do popcorn Q&A, and you just quickly move down your roster and back up to the top, back down to the middle. So students will kind of know when they're going to be up for a question, and just keep on moving through the line. They'll learn that they need to read before coming to class. Partner quizzing. Give students a few minutes to write just 3 questions about what was learned. So it could be 3 questions. What did we learn in class last time? 3 questions. What did you learn from chapter 12 that you read? It could be any questions that they would deem worthy of possibly being on a test eventually. So you might have to model that for them a few times, like true, false, multiple choice, short answer, essay, and have them partner up then to trade questions. So we get in a partner, we just trade papers, and then I answer your 3 questions, you answer mine, and then we come back together and we discuss whether or not the answers are right. So this does a couple things. One, it makes the student critically analyze the content they're learning to identify what is important, what might be on a quiz or what might be on a test. I need to know enough about that to be able to write a good question. And guess what? I need to know the answer to my question I asked. So this is putting the student to student interaction and student to content interaction, and they're really doing some critical thinking, anticipating questions and topics. This next one is partner matching. So create note cards ahead of time. So let's say you're in a unit that has a lot of vocabulary and you just can't get past that. Like, students need to know what these terms mean in order to then move to the higher level of Bloom's taxonomy, analyzing and critiquing and evaluating. But they have to know these terms, these concepts first. So this will take a little prep time on your part. So you'll have matching note cards, so a term on one and a definition on the other. And let's say you have 30 of these cards or 15 of these cards, pairs. And then you go into class and you hand them out randomly as students are coming in, and then have students stand up and find their match. So now they're walking around the classroom and they're trying to find either the word that goes with their definition or the definition that goes with their word. So when a student comes up with a word and meets a student with the definition, it may not be the correct definition, but they're having a discussion about, okay, what is your definition? I don't think that's my word. Do you know what your word you're looking for is? And now they're moving around the room. So once all the matches are made, have them sit down with their match and discuss the match. You might have them write, if I have the term and the back of my card is blank, I might have to write the definition on the back. Or if I have the definition, I'm going to write the term on the other side. You might also have them together come up with a definition, an alternate definition, or a real life application, or something else, an example of something in the real world that can go along with their cards. So have them partner with another pair then to discuss, and now they're discussing 2 terms with their definitions and examples and situations. The next few, and we're almost through our list, are classroom assessment techniques that are digital or utilize a smartphone or a device. So if you do have your phone and you want to find this webpage easily, turn on your camera and you can scan the QR code, and that will pop open the webpage that is on the SNU faculty support site. And I'll show this QR code again here in a little bit. The first one is Kahoot, and it's a game-based learning platform that makes it easy to create, share and play learning games or trivia quizzes in minutes. And it's pretty fun. Students log in, it's free. Students log in with their name, and there's a leaderboard. So, people know that John is in first place, but Karen's right behind, and it can get some good competition can happen within your classroom. And you just present students with a question or an image, and you ask the question and then 4 choices. So the screen is what you see on the right-hand side of that slide there. And then the other side is their device. So they don't need clickers. Their clicker is their phone. So make sure you let students know. I don't think you need to let students know to bring their phone to class. I think most do, but they can also play on a laptop as well. Quizzes is also on this webpage that I offered you guys. Quizzes is a gamified student engagement platform. It offers multiple features to make classroom fun, interactive, and engagement. It's used for formative assessment. It's BYOD, bring your own device. Students can access on a laptop, a tablet, and or a phone. And it's basically instructor-paced gamified quizzing. Mentimeter, it's an easy to use online tool for voting and interactive engaging sessions. And you can use it as a complement to your PowerPoint slides or your interactive components, or you can push all slide content into Mentimeter. There is a free version that I would encourage you to check out. But the Mentimeter's interactive slide layouts allow you to initiate audience response synchronously during your presentation. So as you're talking about concepts, and this might be, you may have, let's say you have a unit that is could be pretty opinion-based, or it could incite divided thoughts about a particular topic. And you want students to be able to anonymously give their input on the screen in front of everyone without, it's all aggregated, so it doesn't say, you know, which student said what. It simply says 52% of the students in this classroom believe whatever the one choice was, and 48% of them believe the other choice. And then that would incite a pretty solid discussion or debate within your classroom over that particular topic. So it can really spark engaged discussion within your classroom. And then Quizlet, and Quizlet is interesting because you as the teacher can create Quizlets with flashcards, terms and definitions, or terms and examples, or you can have students create them, or students on their own could create them and share them with each other so they can trade and use flashcards for studying. My kids are I have a kid in high school, and he uses this frequently with his friends to learn his vocab for the week. So here's that slide again with that QR code. It's on the snufacultysupport.com webpage, and that's a great page to bookmark so that you can take a look at it. But first, I want to know, what was your cat's meow from today? What's your favorite in the chat? If you would just let me know. We had the KWL, the minute paper, the muddiest point, red light, green light, think, pair, share, concept map, popcorn Q&A, partner quizzing, partner matching, Kahoot, quizzes, Mentimeter, and Quizlet. Great. We've got a vote for red light, green light. Good. I'm glad you found that helpful. So these are all the cats I wanted to present today. I'll go back to this slide in case you were wanting to capture that QR code. If you have any questions or have any topics you'd like to see in the next First Friday's webinar, please let me know. Have a wonderful day.